Hi everybody, good to be here. Nice to see you friends. As some of you heard, most of the Monastic Academy gang is on silent retreat right now. So I am holding down the fort and we will be doing a talk and some guided practice. And then at the end, we will have time to discuss and we can ask questions or reports, things like that. So, yeah, lovely to be here. My name is Pan. I think I've met all of you, which is great. Really nice. The talk tonight is, some of you may have seen the email, it's titled Staying Fresh. And I want to explore what it means to live with freshness. Now, what is freshness? That might mean different things to different people, but to me, staying fresh in life is really this sense of being awake, being alive, having this sense of wonder, this even childlike, wow, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm fresh. And there are moments of freshness that we could probably all think of. I was putting these beautiful decorations out, and I happened to catch a whiff of this scent, this evergreen scent. And people say that's a commonly said to be fresh, this sense, a fresh thing. So I caught it, and suddenly my senses just came alive, and I was like, wow, I was totally pulled into the present. And so I was like, oh yeah, fresh, that's what people are talking about when they say fresh. And yeah, so on the flip side of fresh, there's sort of the opposite of fresh, which is stagnant. Maybe it's subdued, it's cloudy, it's distracted, it's kind of in a haze. Unfortunately, this can take over our lives. A lot of people out there in the world are living in this sort of stagnation, stuckness, heaviness, contractedness. Myself often included. I think all of us can probably attest to times where we were feeling quite fresh and we had that wonder and that aliveness and that presence. And then other times where we were totally the opposite of that, or dragged down, stuck, congealed, and it can, I think, change very rapidly too. So it's clear that this is something that fluctuates. It's not like we're permanently fresh or we're permanently stuck and stagnated. So, if things can change, then the question becomes, how can we move towards more freshness in life? How can we move away from this sort of lostness, this sleepwalking through life, and instead come alive, come awake? And that's something that's worth exploring, because that gives us our lives. To be alive and awake, to be fresh, that's worth delving into. So that's what I'd like to do tonight. So, what might keep us from being fresh? Well, one of the things that gets in our way is distraction. So if you think about going through life and being fresh, a big part of it is being able to have concentration. And by concentration I mean being with whatever it is that we're attending to in this moment. So if we're walking down the street, then we're walking down the street. If we're eating a meal, then we're with the experience of eating a meal. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. Becoming distracted, being pulled away, suddenly we're living caught up in memory, fantasy, planning, a haze, and we're losing that sense of being there, that sense of being with what it is that we're experiencing and living, what we're doing in life, and where we are and what's going on. So we get caught in this haze, we get pulled, distracted. And concentration is the skill of coming back to where we are now, to what our present moment experience is. And thankfully, this is a skill that we can build. It's funny, as I was writing this talk, I was writing down, I have some notes here, I'll look at this a while. So I'm writing these notes about concentration. And suddenly I find myself drifting off. I'm like, oh, what am I doing? Oh, concentration. I'm like, oh, this is ironic. But there's, countless times that you can think of, like, I think of the classic, like, I'm at my desk, so out at the Monastic Academy, which is our full-time mindfulness and leadership training center in Lowell. I have a desk, I do all of the resources stuff, so that means, like, I'm paying out the bills, I'm taking in the donations, I'm on QuickBooks. So I have a desk, like many people have a desk at their job, and the worst is when I'm going to my desk and I open up my drawer to get something, and then I suddenly find myself, like, I've been off in somewhere else, and I come back and I'm like looking at this drawer, and I realize that I've just been fumbling around with different items in the drawer, and I'm like, this is awful. Why am I in this drawer? What was I getting? I don't even know. And this is like, this moment of like, this is not ideal. This is not fresh. This is lost. This is stagnant. And yeah, so this can have many implications in our lives too. It may seem like not a big deal, and yet it can really impact how we show up in so many situations that affect our quality of life and others. I was talking the other day with my dad on FaceTime. Dad, if you're out there watching this recording, hello. So I'm talking to my dad, and suddenly he says, I just started talking to him, he says, hey, I'm here with David Wald, who's this wonderful friend who I've known, friend of the family, great guy from North Dakota, just a solid, wonderful guy. Can't say enough good things about him. Great, just family man, big Catholic family. So suddenly there's David. Hey, David. Oh man, I'm so excited. It's David Wald. I haven't seen him for years. Well, for a while. And so I start communicating with him, and then I start fiddling around with something else I was working on. I was, these papers, and suddenly I look up and I'm like, oh man, I don't know, David's not on the screen anymore. I'm like, wow. This is just a moment of suddenly this opportunity to really connect with a human being, to have intimacy in this way with a friend who I care about. It's gone like that quick. And I really hope that I'll see David again soon, but you never know. And why did this happen? Because I was distracted. So I came back to it, and I had a conversation with my dad, and it was good, but this impacts our lives, and I don't know how it impacted David. Maybe he felt like, oh wow, like I really want to connect with you, and you're shuffling papers around. That doesn't really feel very good. That impacts somebody else. So it does make a difference. So there's, we ask ourselves, well, what are the other things that might get in the way of being fresh, being alive? Another one that comes to mind is a sense of having filters or lenses or accumulated ways of seeing things that we've just kind of developed over our lives. And it makes sense that we would develop, these sort of like ways of understanding the world. But we build up these different layers upon which we see everything in the world. And so we're not actually seeing clearly what's going on. We're seeing maybe what we remember. Maybe like some vague idea that's partly we're seeing it, but partly it's dreamed up by us. because we kind of think we know how things are, and we've had experiences in the past, so we pull the past experiences in, and then therefore we have some approximation of reality. Usually it's not like totally imagined, but it's also not just totally what is. And therefore there's not a complete freshness there. I think about, there's a lot of implications to this too. Driving down the road, you know, how many times do you just assume, okay, I've driven this road a million times, I'm going to work, I've been there, I've been done that, or you're driving home, and so you know what it looks like, you know the road, you know all the stops, you know this and that. So you're driving along, and then suddenly there's a dog in the road, and whoa, you come into realization that you weren't really fully seeing what was going on until that moment with the dog. And then of course, hopefully, you were present enough to slam on the brakes. But there's this level of just assuming, okay, I know what the road looks like, and therefore you kind of fill it in with your memory. I do this, we do this. And hopefully you don't have the dog. But if you're really fresh, if you're really present, if you're actually there, this, seeing things as they emerge, letting them emerge and fall away with clarity, sensory clarity, this ability to really not just be with an experience, but to see it deeply, to really penetrate it more deeply, to really look at it. If we can do that, then freshness increases. So not only are we staying with our present moment experience, but we're able to really look at it with a brightness, a vividness, something that's more alive. And again, this is a skill that we build through the mindfulness practice, which is hopeful. It's good news that it's not just, we're just at a whim and there's nothing we can really do about it. We can actually come, we can sit down, we can meditate, and then we'll be building our concentration power, we'll be building our sensory clarity. So another friend, friendship is very important for this path and this practice and life. And so I had a moment of sensory clarity recently. So I was in the van and we had this guest recently named Darianse. I talked about David. Darianse is like this totally different person and very wonderful in their own right. So Darianse is like this Native American and African American ancestry, like from hot Atlanta, totally fabulous drag queen. And they came up and visited the Monastic Academy, and just a wonderful person. Just a really totally different person than the kind of people that I'm used to around here in Vermont, you know. So it was like, I was driving in the van, I'm listening to Darianse tell some stories about like, oh, this is my life, and I'm going to New York City to do a drag show at the hotel where all the people from the Titanic, when it sank, they put them in this hotel, so it's this Titanic themed drag show, and they're like, I'm like, whoa, this is awesome. And I was just, it was so fresh, because I was really able to like hear the experience, but it wasn't until I actually started listening to them, because I had at first been concentrating, and I'm like, okay, Darianse is cool, I don't really know them, but they're nice, so I'm driving along and they start talking, and I was sort of like just hearing, it's not that I wasn't allowing their words to be in my awareness, but it was only when I opened up this sense of sensory clarity, and was like, opened myself to really hearing and receiving the impact of their words fully, that it came alive, that these stories just, this vividness just exploded. So we have concentration, you're being with the story that's being told, you're hearing the words, but you're also really seeing them brightly, clearly, in this fresh way. So I'm cruising with Darianse, and I'm like, wow. And then I had this other experience with them. So we stopped at this place along Route 100, Waterbury, called Sunflower. It's like a little health store. And Darianse is, so I'm like, wow, this is such a vivid story, and you know, it was impacting me. I see Darianse taking a picture of this little metal sunflower decoration. And I'm like, I've seen that thing before, you know, like it's just a little metal sunflower. It's kind of cool. But to Dariance, you know, they've never been there before. This is like their first time seeing this. So to them, it's very fresh. It's very new. It's very alive. It's like, oh, cool. To them, that's the equivalent of me hearing their new story. So they're taking pictures of this little sunflower decoration. And I said to myself, why is that less fresh? Is it just like there's something inherent about like a new exciting experience that's more fresh than something that I know about? Well, maybe. But that seems disappointing. Like we have to always be getting new, big experiences to be living in this fresh way. So I went over, I'm like, I know that's not right. I've been around Soryu long enough. No, that's not right. So I went over to where Dariance was taking those pictures, and I really just let myself look at the sunflower for a moment, and kind of vibing with Dariance, who was like really into it. And I just kind of like looked over at this sunflower from where they were taking pictures, so I looked over, and it was just a moment of like really seeing the sunflower and just like dropping any assumptions that I had about it, any memories of it, and just like seeing it anew. And I was like, it increased in its vividness. It became more interesting. It became brighter and more, it became more there. It was like its freshness, its aliveness just came into view. And what was that? It was me just allowing it. It was me dropping aside this story, this assumption that I know what this thing looks like because I've been by it. I've been to the store. I've driven by it. So I dropped that old layer, that sort of assumption that I had brought in, that filter with which I was seeing the sunflower that came with the story and the baggage of this is something that I already know what it looks like and it's just kind of this thing and I don't care about it. I dropped that, inspired by Dariance. And in doing so, suddenly the world opened up in a new sort of freshness, a new sort of aliveness. So that was great. And from there, we continued our journey. We continued our journey driving, and it was then that I realized another lesson. So Dariance kept telling me some stories, and I was listening a lot. As a side note, there's a practice that I learned in the Art of Leadership training with the Rockwood Leadership Institute. And we're not going to actually like practice it tonight, but it's the idea of, the exercise is called either leaning in or leaning back, or you could also think of it as leaning forward or leaning out, in, out, back, forth. So in any conversation or in your interaction that you're having with a person, you can notice, do you tend to talk, and they're totally like steamrolled. Like they aren't even getting a word in edgewise, maybe they feel overwhelmed, you're just listening to yourself gab. Or do you stay completely silent, even if you have important things to share, even if you want to share, and you feel like it would be useful to share, you have the pattern of just staying totally silent. So you mindfully observe yourself using that clarity to see, how is it that I'm interacting? And then you compensate for that. So if you find that you're just gabbing all the time, that's sort of this, this yang energy is like this masculine outward energy, then you pull that back and you increase your listening. You increase the yin energy, the receptive, the feminine energy, if you want to go that way. If you find that you are too withdrawn and you're really not letting your truth out, you're not speaking something that is something you'd like to share, then you intentionally step in and share. So anyway, that's something you can try. And it's also worth noting that it can be different in every relationship that you have. So maybe with your boss at work, maybe you really need to step in more. But then maybe with your friends, it's better to step back more. And maybe, then with your romantic partner, it's one way, and with your kid, it's another way, etc., etc. So anyway, something you can try. Yeah. So I'm driving along with Darianse. The journey continues. Hi, Darianse. I hope you're watching. Yeah, so the journey continues, and now Darianse starts telling me this story about, there's this land that was in their family. Really interesting story about how, so it's like there's like all this history down in the South about how African Americans could not, they were citizens, but they couldn't own land. And then Native Americans were not citizens, but they could own land. They were given land. So because of that, the Native Americans and the African Americans ended up marrying each other for sort of to be able to survive in this political system that had like specific ways of discriminating against each one. Really interesting stuff. So I'm listening to that, and I'm like, but that's also very foreign to me. I'm like, here I am, like a privileged white guy who doesn't have to think about those things. I have the privilege to not have to think about what it would be like for my ancestors. This was like, we're talking about like, this was going on, I think, like 100 years ago, maybe like people that he could trace back, like actual people that he knew and like had seen pictures of in his life had gone through this. So he's telling me the story, and I'm listening. I'm trying to be more yin. I'm trying to be more. I'm leaning back. I'm allowing. I'm taking in his story, his energy. I'm just because oftentimes I'm a yapper. I'm up here yapping right now. So I'm receiving, and as I'm receiving this story, he starts telling me this part about how some white folks have been trying to get a hold of the land, and his grandmother had the land, and then she almost lost it because these people were trying to scam her, and it was like sort of like these white folks were trying to get the land, and something in me just immediately was like, no, I don't want to hear that. Like, I don't buy this. There's just this resistance in me. And then I realized that was coming up. I was kind of surprised. And I realized that I wasn't having equanimity with what they were saying because I'm a white person, and so part of me was sort of identifying with, well, they're white people and they were doing something that was dishonest, so that was bad, and maybe I'm bad because I'm white, so therefore I don't like that, and I'm going to push that away because I don't want to feel like I'm bad. And so this is a sort of like realization, and I guess I had clarity around that. So then I allowed myself, because then I said rationally, well, this is their perspective, this is their experience. Like, I want to receive that. I want to be able to have that connection with this person. And so I dropped that and was able to really just receive that and say, this is their experience. Can I be with Darianse in their experience? And I'm saying they because they choose to use they, them pronouns. So I was able to drop that, and suddenly I was able to really connect with Darianse more. Whereas before, suddenly this barrier had come up that kept me from really seeing the reality. So I had these assumptions, and by finding equanimity, allowing myself to be with that experience of hearing that, even if there was discomfort, without pushing it away and without grasping onto my preconceived notions about I am a white person and therefore I identify with white people, and I was able to just do my best to allow for myself to be the fact that I am white. I wasn't changing that, but I was allowing myself to be with someone else's experience just as it was, even with what was arising in my body, to have equanimity with that. So in that way, there was a moment of breaking down this sort of ingrained patterns the filters of institutionalized racism that were arising within me, that had been indoctrinated, and that was liberating. And I'm glad that I had that opportunity to work through that, and I think that that makes an impact in the world. Yeah. Yeah, these two wonderful people, David and Dariance, it was just like, I was thinking about them, and it's like I was thinking like, wow, these people are like polar opposites, you know? Like David, like this solid, like North Dakota hunting, fishing, family guy who is like more traditional and more conservative, and just this great friend of the family over all these years. He's always been there. And then Dariance, who's just like this, you know, larger than life presence, and like is totally non-traditional in so many ways, and you know, just like one of them is white and one of them is black, and even their names, like David, you know, this kind of like David, you know, it's like solid standard, and then Dariance, you know, just like so I was like, I was appreciating them, but then I realized that again, I was putting these filters on them, even just thinking about them as I was creating this talk, and kind of boxing them in. And yes, these things are true. So in a way, these filters do have use, because they can help us to understand the world. They can help us to coordinate. Somebody who's visiting used this term, the coordination of minds, in order to live compassionately. So there is use in this. But it's like my mind was immediately going to like these sort of like this desire to create narratives and stories. And I was losing the freshness because I was just boxing them in. So at that point, I made an intention to just drop all the stories and just be with, as best I could, the sense of, neither of them were present, but the sense of David. Just be with that. And as anything, and then in the next moment, be with that. What's it like now? What's it like now? Again, same thing with Dariance. Just Dariance, okay, here it is. This direct freshness. And when I did that, I felt that these are both just wonderful, bright, beautiful beings. It's just great people. And was reminded that each of them has this divine nature, this Buddha nature, this Christ nature, the God nature, the goddess nature, the divine nature of all of us. We have that. And when we can be present, when we can be right there, concentrated, and when we can see deeply, brightly, clearly, and when we can allow whatever it is that we're seeing to arise and to pass away without trying to mess with it, then we can begin to open up and see a natural wonder in the world, a natural divinity, beauty that is in everyone, and really everything that's going on. It's all the layers that get in the way of experiencing that. And the more that we experience that divinity, the more we're fascinated by the world. This is like my experience as I was remembering Dariance and David. There was this sense of like, yeah, oh man, this is great. I love this. This feels so fresh. So there's this feedback loop we can develop as we're going about seeing things freshly. We see how beautiful the world is. We see how beautiful each moment can be, how beautiful life is. And as we see how beautiful and wonderful existence and life is, that helps us to continue to be fresh. Well, it looks like it's about time to move into a period of meditation practice. So, of course, we talk about all these things. We share these ideals of let's be fresh and let's be alive. But thankfully and amazingly, we have a practice. We have an actual thing that we can do to bring us to freshness, to build those core skills, concentration, clarity, equanimity, as defined in the Unified Mindfulness system, we can build that. That's exciting. So now we have an opportunity to practice. Take a moment to find a posture that works for you. Preferably upright and alert, but also relaxed and settled. Remember that during this time, if you need to adjust, maybe you need to stand or lie down, that's completely acceptable. You may wish to have your eyes closed, partially open, or open for our first exercise of this period of practice. Turn your attention to bodily sensations, any felt sensation. Shine the light of awareness on anything you're feeling. This could be physical or maybe emotional sensations, energetic sensations, any felt sensation. For now, we'll turn away from any sounds, auditory sensations, or any visual experiences, and only focus on felt sensations. And as you explore somatic phenomena, remember to stay with that experience. If you find yourself drifting away into auditory or visual experience, that's okay. Just bring yourself back to felt experience. This is developing concentration power. taking a sense of confidence each time that you realize that you have slipped away into auditory or visual distraction, that you've recognized that. Now you can come back, if that happens for you. As you explore these felt sensations, see if you can increase the intensity with which you're experiencing each one, penetrating each experience, each felt sensation, the sense of brightness. Explore, try that, see what it's like. This is developing the skill of sensory clarity. Zooming in on each felt experience in present time, untangling it, as if looking at it under a microscope. Shining a light onto it. Good. Now, as you continue to stay with and explore felt experience, see if you can allow each experience, each somatic phenomenon to arise and fall away without push or pull, without pushing away an experience that your mind may tell you is bad, without pulling or grasping onto an experience that seems pleasurable and trying to hold on to it and never let it go. See if you can have equanimity with each somatic experience as it comes and as it goes. Excellent. Now let's shift gears and turn attention towards auditory phenomena, sounds. This can be hear out, sounds in the objective world, like sound of the heater, sound of birds, sound of your own breath. Or this could be sounds in the objective world, hear in the sound of your own mental chatter or music playing in your own subjective experience, mental tunes. Anything that is an auditory experience is where you want to bring your attention using your concentration power, setting aside visual and somatic phenomena. Striving to hear those sounds, to hear each sound as it arises more clearly. And allowing the sounds to arise without any assumptions and pass away without any memory. Just letting them come and go with equanimity. Very good. Now we'll switch gears once again. Let's turn our attention towards visual phenomenon. This can be visual experience in the objective world, the room around you, the floor, the wall, or it can be in the subjective world, any images arising in your mind's eye. And if you have your eyes closed and there are no images other than maybe the swirling gray screen in front of you, you can always notice that there is visual rest, that there does not seem to be any visual content. But setting aside somatic and auditory phenomena to focus on visual experience as it arises and passes away. Engaging each visual experience with the brightness, the aliveness of sensory clarity. Allowing each visual experience to arise and pass away without any interference. Good. Now, you have noticed we're moving fairly quickly through these techniques. And this is on purpose. This is so that we can stay on our toes and perhaps increase the freshness, the newness, the aliveness. So, of course, freshness is available to us in any situation, as was demonstrated with the sunflower example, but by moving from one thing to the next can be a helpful way of training ourselves. So now let's return to felt experience, somatic experience. It can be a physical phenomena, emotional, energetic phenomena arising. Turn to just feel. And if you like, you can allow yourself to let your attention go to whatever felt experience is arising, wherever the mind wants to go within the focus space of feel. But I'd like to offer an alternative challenge. Should you choose to accept it, your assignment will be that each time you notice a somatic sensation arise, to note it, that is, to see it clearly, pay attention to it, and then let it go and look for a somatic experience somewhere else in your awareness. So maybe you feel an itch on your eyelid. You would note, feel, there is an itch, perhaps even labeling it by saying in your mind, feel. You would note the feeling in your eyelid, but then you would immediately let go of that and look for some somatic experience somewhere else. So maybe the next experience is the feeling of warmth on your feet on the floor. Good, you would note that. And then as soon as you recognize that you've noted that feeling of warmth on your feet on the floor, turn towards yet another somatic experience. Maybe it's the feeling of moisture on your palms. Great, notice that. And then turn towards another somatic experience. Maybe it's some pain in your neck. Great, notice that. Is there another somatic experience waiting right around the corner? Move from somatic experience to experience to experience. One way to increase the ease of this is to induce physical or somatic experiences. You could do this by, really creating any sort of feeling on any part of your body. So pushing your fingers together, pushing your tongue against the roof of your mouth, blinking your eyes, moving your shoulders, lifting your hand, wiggling your bottom, pushing your feet against the floor, releasing your jaw, untensing your eyebrows, and then moving on from one somatic experience to the next. And that's optional. You can just notice what's arising without aiding yourself in that way. But try to move from one arising of somatic experience to the next. As soon as you notice one arising, let it fall away for the next experience somewhere else. See if you can find a freshness in each new experience, each new felt sensation. Good, let's keep moving. Now turn your attention towards visual phenomena. It might help to have your eyes open for this one. This time, notice a visual phenomenon and then turn to the next visual phenomenon. So one way to do this is to look at a little object that you see in front of you, some sort of visual experience arising, maybe a knot of wood on the floor, or a bit of the carpet, piece of a chair, a light bulb. Each time that you notice a visual phenomenon, noting it, and then moving on to the next. Of course, if you like, you can just note any visual phenomenon without this extra level of challenge. But if you like, see what it's like to try and keep moving from visual experience to visual experience. Allowing each sight that you see to arise and then immediately fall away, replaced by some other visual experience. Seeing something fresh and new. And again and again. if your mind wanders, or if you're trying a challenge and you get stuck on just looking at one fixed object, that's okay. Just as soon as you notice it, begin anew. In each moment we have the opportunity to live in freshness. All right. Now we'll once again turn towards auditory phenomena. And again, I invite you to add a challenge. And each time you hear something, note it and look for a different sound. Now, in order to make this a little bit easier, we're all going to participate, we're all invited to participate in an aid to this. So what I'd like you to do is, at any pace you like, start snapping your fingers. And see if you can hear each snap, and then immediately let go of that and try and find a new snap or any other sound. Make other sounds too, you can clap your hands. If you notice yourself drifting off, just come back. There's plenty of sounds to choose from. All right, in a moment I'm going to ring this bell and we're going to move into a period of practice in movement. During this time, I invite you to pay attention to any visual, auditory, or somatic experience that arises. Continue with the challenge of letting each experience arise and then letting it go. You may find that you're looking at new experiences each moment, but one opportunity is to stay with something without having to jump around intentionally, and just seeing if you can keep the same freshness that you experienced with whatever it is that you're doing. Whether it's something new, or maybe you're looking at the same thing you were just a moment ago, maybe you're feeling the same sensation that you were. See if you can approach it with the same sense of newness, of freshness, of openness. So we'll have a few minutes to practice this. Feel free to get up and move around in motion, and then we'll return to our seats when I ring the bell again. For the last portion of this evening's formal practice, I invite you to allow any sensory experience, seen, heard, felt, to arise, to note it. There's no need to jump around anymore. Although, if you'd like to continue with the challenge, you could. But what I invite you to do instead, if you like, is to just see what your experience is like now. Allowing your attention to travel to any seen, heard, or felt experience. Staying present with whatever visual, somatic, or auditory phenomena is arising in your awareness in this present moment. Staying fully present with this moment, this moment, this moment, whatever it is that's arising. receiving each experience as a gift with rich, bright, clear perception. Finding equanimity with each experience as it arises, allowing it to come and go, finding peace with it. Staying with it and experiencing each moment with a as much freshness as is available. Remembering that each moment of our lives, each experience, each interaction that we have with another is an opportunity to engage. It's an opportunity to allow. It's an opportunity to be present. It's an opportunity to open. It's an opportunity to have this aliveness and this freshness. Thank you for your practice, everyone. We'll now move into a period of discussion, sharing. You can ask me questions. I'll do my very best to provide useful answers. And you can really talk about whatever you like, what it was like for you, or anything else that calls to you. And of course, if folks don't have much to share, that's totally okay too. If that's the case, we can have a little more time for some more practice. The floor is yours.
I guess I'd like to thank you. I'm a carpenter and I admire this building. And I just gave this room a thorough inspection.
Nice.
With sounds. And I've always wanted to rub my fingernails down these walls.
Ah, nice, nice.
And I've always admired the old glass. And how each pane has its own distinct way that it wavers in the light and shows its age. It's beautiful. Thank you for showing me the imperfect glass.
Yeah.
That's a projection, I guess, huh? Is that what that is? It's a giant projection.
Hey, that's okay.
Perception is something that I'm working on, and these things you teach of random attention, jolting in a way, I think that's balancing and reconciling, maybe. Because we do run through life with a million things in our heads all day. Recently I learned that being the water is much better than being the rock. And flow is good.
Thank you. Reminded me to stay with the water. But no, thank you. Very beautiful words. Yeah.
I think you turned us all into poets, especially with the way you spoke just now. I think maybe you should write it down for this building. It's being seen maybe for the first time. Beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of things in our lives, they're right in front of us and we fail to see them. So maybe it's the quick awareness trickery you just taught me, I guess.
It's a trick that brings you there. Yeah.
Attention, trickery.
Yeah.
And it opens us up. Our minds are flowers. They're really capable of amazing things. And the collaborative connection we have with one another. And trying to imagine how someone else can perceive things or can see those things, and seeing the flaws in your own perceptions. It's this is good.
Yeah. I'm soaking in your words. Just appreciating your share. You said a lot of beautiful things, I think.
Can I say one last thing?
Please, yeah.
I've never grown a beard. It is the strangest thing. And every day I want to cut it or do something because it's just so...
In your face?
It's in my face. But I came to the realization to just let it grow. And the social constructs we place on each other, when we go into a room, we classify each other, and this whole thing is it's all perceptions that are wrong sometimes. So let it grow, let it flow.
That's right. Potent words. Yeah, so in the unified mindfulness system, there's a term of flow, and flow of course can mean many things, but one way to think about it is change. And so this exercise was a way of inducing flow, because as you move from one thing to another, you are forcing yourself to have a change in your perception, and to recognize that each moment is part of the flow. Each moment is a change. and I really am happy that you had that experience of like this flower opening. Brings me joy that you're able to appreciate this wonderful building that we sit in, we've been in together, and and here like you had the chance to just like really open to this thing that we see all the time that we just assume, we have assumptions about, we have memories of it, so it just kind of passes us by. And yet when we open to it, when we approach it with mindfulness, then there's just like beauty. Like, that's so cool. Like, that's the sunflower story from my talk, where here's this sunflower thing. It's this, weird little sculpture that I've seen before. And when I take the time to really just be with it and drop anything I have about assumptions and stories about it, then it's just like it has this innate wonder, this childlike freshness. Really appreciate what you said. I've got to record it.
It's all fresh.
It's all fresh. Yeah. And then one of the liberating parts of it all is that when we have experiences like what you described, you start to see that it's not about the content of the experience so much as the way that we're experiencing. And so if it's not about what we're experiencing, then we can find meaning and we can find some sort of fulfillment in any kind of content, any kind of type of experience, whether it's, something that our stories would tell us is boring, or even, painful or unpleasant, or something that we don't want. If we can change our relationship to it and open ourselves with mindfulness, change the way that we're experiencing, then we can get through anything. Then we can approach any challenge, any boredom, any doldrums, any of that staleness, and we can look at it in a whole new way, and that frees us. Yeah. Like, I used to hate standing in lines. And now I'm like, oh good, I'm standing in line. I have a chance to meditate. Like, this is great. Like, I have a chance to just look around at stuff. And it's interesting. And it's like, we're all on the journey. It's a work in progress. It's like, it'd be nice to say like, oh, I'm just going to be 100% super happy with anything, and throw a brick at my head and I'll still just be like, well, this is great. But so we're all working towards this sort of happiness that exists without conditions. We're all on a journey towards that. But each time that we build these skills, each time that we come together and practice, or we practice on our own, we're improving our concentration power, our sensory clarity, our equanimity, and the integration of them. And that is of enormous benefit to our lives and to those who we touch.
I had a beautiful experience this week. I went to a 6-year-old's birthday. And I decided that since he was interested in nature, that I would give him an old compass that I'd had for years and never really used, and I hadn't ever really seen it, so I gave it to him. He sat there for like a half an hour and asked me so many questions. He saw so many things on that compass that I had never seen before. There were all kinds of dials and words, and I couldn't believe that I had never seen all those things. This 6-year-old saw this and wanted to know how it related to the world.
Wow.
And then he said, oh, I have a map, and he pulled out a map of China.
Oh.
And so we ended up putting this compass on the map of China and aligning it with the north. And I couldn't believe that I hadn't seen that compass. And I was thinking, well, I should probably give it to Goodwill. This was a few months ago. And then I realized this little boy probably would like it. But then I realized it was a treasure for him. And now for me, because the treasure was seeing through his eyes what I had never seen. So like the gift was, that I gave came back to me in an unbelievable way. But being and I was totally present in those moments with him. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
So sometimes it takes another being to be able to see, like you mentioned, not Beyonce, but
Beyonce. Beyonce, hey.
I thought of him immediately when you were talking about Beyonce.
Yeah. Yeah, this reminds me of one of the great gifts I've had in my life is like being able to travel. Because you go to another place and like suddenly you see, whoa, there's all these things that I got in patterns with and just started assuming and just like kind of didn't realize that there are all these other ways of life that other people are living, all these other like things look different and suddenly it's like, oh yeah, things are new, things are alive again. There's this wonder and there's and the children, man, they're
seeing the freshness of a child means that we can touch this freshness that you're talking about.
Yeah, live.
What's his name?
Oh, Welland.
Wella?
Welland. Got a cross between Irish and Welsh. Yeah. And the other thing that I thought immediately is children are often accused of being fresh.
Oh yeah, don't you get fresh with me, young man?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Isn't that weird?
You didn't talk about that. There's a danger in being fresh.
Yes. Yeah. Wow, that's an interesting parallel. Like maybe not being fresh is a form of social control of sorts. Like obviously a parent has to kind of corral their kid to keep them in line with, the workings of the household or whatever. But in what ways does that also reflect on our systems of governance, the economic systems that we live in, like how does it hold us in line to not be fresh if we're just marching along blindly? We're not really looking at things clearly, brightly. We're not really untangling what's happening. We're just kind of distracted.
Yeah. When I think of fresh with kids, it's like, when somebody's a little different than other people, and kids kind of points it out, and you say, don't do that, don't look at that person, like, don't see those differences, like, because it's, you're trying not to offend, but it's like, there's something, and when I think of fresh, being fresh, children point to everything, and
well, then they point to our own inability to talk, to really get a bigger perspective on what they're seeing, and help them acknowledge their own perceptions in a human way. It seems like we don't really know what to do, but culture has told us what to do, and then we stop there.
just shut it down, kind of.
Or stale is safer.
I guess so, yeah.
There's a safety to it. There's a safety
it's
to
kind
it.
of the complexity. It's like Surya a lot of times talks about things are complex, and just shutting things down because they're too complex. You know, like how do you deal with all of that stuff, it's easier to shut it down than to open up to all the nuances and how do I deal in this situation and how do I deal in that situation.
Right. My poor niece said at the dinner table, when I was on the West Coast visiting family, she said, well, tell me about your religion, or what do you go to church? And the mother said immediately, we don't talk about religion or politics in this family.
Oh, wow.
And so the child had to shut down. But there was a reason why, because there was one of the members would get irate. So they were trying to control the emotions of the whole family. So it was pretty scary to think about how she was learning to shut down.
Yeah.
Because she was so bright and curious and wanting to know, why did you say that, Just
Wow.
I have a 12-year-old story of a cabinet maker's son who was helping him build boxes. His cabinets are just boxes. And they glued and stapled this thin back to the back of a cabinet, and they shot it on with this crown stapler, this tool that shoots the staples in. My friend, the cabinet maker, took a rubber mallet, he knocked the back off and said, we've got to remake this, it's the wrong size. He gave his son some pliers and said, pull all these staples out, clean it up, we'll restaple the new one. He leaves the room. He hears the staple gun firing again. He says, what's that kid doing? His perception, 12 years old. If the staple gun can shoot the staples in, it can shoot the staples out. He took the staples out of the gun, slid the staple on the gun in reverse, and shot the staples out. To this day, when that cabinet maker messes up and has to remake, he uses the gun in reverse because his 12-year-old son taught him.
Amazing.
Perception. We need to respect children and their perceptions.
Yeah. And
They have wide.
just that willingness to look at things in a new light.
Yes.
Instead of just assuming, oh, I know how this works, but oh, like what am I actually seeing here?
Stale ways, really. There are more ways to do things than we know.
Well, I just saw, maybe it was Facebook, but there was a quote by Buckminster Fuller.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
No, but I mean, he's
Oh. Well, he said, with my first child, I realized that children are probably born geniuses and that we
Yes.
mess them up.
and that makes sense.
Domesticate them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's those layers that I was talking about. That's all of the filters that we see through, they get heavy. They hold us back. They have some uses, but then we are trapped by them and we don't realize that they're there. We can't turn them off or see beyond them. Then we're slaves to them.
But it's never too late to find the little genius inside, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And which is what you're kind of awakening us to doing that.
I hope so. Yeah, I mean that's the excitement of mindfulness practice, is like, wow, we can get back to this state of brightness, aliveness, this wonder, this childlike sense. It's like, wow, this is available to us. How cool is that? How lucky are we? So
Like you said, we can take it off. Until you see what it feels like to take it off, you don't know that it's on.
yeah, you don't know what you're carrying around.
Meditate and you get this like, whoa, like, this is fun, I feel really connected and, I'm just really present. Yeah, the first time I well, I had a spiritual kind of experience way when I was way younger before I ever meditated. But yeah, it's just that when you zone it and you kind of enter into that space where you're present, it's just like a big, powerful experience. Like, oh my God, I wasn't present before. Who knew?
Yeah, it's hard to know what you're carrying around until you start setting pieces of it down.
Yeah, I think for me it's always been a very peaceful experience. For me it's always been, for meditation has been always understanding myself, who I am, really understanding my soul. If I can reach my soul, understanding kind of what that is. And I think I found my way there by really understanding the concept of love. At least that's what it was for me. So by meditating for me was really understanding the concept and all the really facets of love. And I think that's really what helped me kind of become more spiritual. And it wasn't just, and what I realized along the way was, because I've been meditating for quite a long time, but I realized along the way was, it wasn't just meditating and trying to understand love and focusing on things that are really special in the world, really positive principles, but it was also doing the same thing in the life that I was living physically. Since I always separate the physical and spiritual world, but it was also doing the same things in my physical life, which is actually much difficult. One could argue that that's even more difficult. Others might say, I can't sit there still for 15, 20, 30 minutes, an hour, but I can physically love, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but doing both, I think, is a huge benefit to really finding your spiritual way. At least that's been my experience, and it's just treating everybody with compassion, love, kindness, and everything you do, every step you take, if you can do it that way. And it's like, wow, well, that's like, how do I do that? Sometimes it feels like it's impossible, but if you like really, I feel like if I practice it a lot, so I feel like the more practice I give it, I kind of remind myself that you can do that. Even with like the person that may have done something terrible to you, you can still show them kindness, respect, love, compassion. And that's kind of what's really helped me kind of find my spiritual journey in myself, if that makes any sense. I guess that's the way I would explain it.
That's very astute and beautiful. And that is the core teaching of the Monastic Academy: awakening, the meditation and responsibility, the action. And you're finding that putting those two together is the path of spirituality. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, both because it was very touching and beautiful, and because it's the perfect segue to the next portion of the evening.